Hello and welcome to a new episode for AICA Podcast. I am Mihaela Ion, and today I have this great honor of having an awesome speaker with me, Alfredo Cramerotti. And we're going to talk a little bit about AICA, about the roles of art criticism. We're going to talk about his projects, and also we're going to talk about the issues that are quite critical from our point of view in how we see the art world, how we see museums, galleries, and all sorts of events. Alfredo, thank you very much for accepting our invitation, and thank you very
Okay.
much for being a special guest for AICA podcast.
Thank you for having me, Mihaela. It's a pleasure. It's an honor, actually.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. My first question is related to your huge activity because you're a curator, you're a writer, you're a broadcaster, you're an organizer for different exhibitions. How can you do all sorts of these roles in the same time?
Yeah, I wish I had more time, or I wish we had the day of 25 hours, but it's not. I've just tried to be organized in terms of the timing. I have to say that I rarely work alone, so I always work with a team, with a colleague, with a collective. So somehow it becomes easier when you are not by yourself, overwhelmed by different tasks, because you can step out a bit, and then other people can step in, and vice versa. When they are overwhelmed, you can step in to help them. So it's a bit of an ethic, if you want, of working, not to work alone, but to work as part of a team.
That's great because you are also the chair of AICA Digital Strategies Committees, and we are working also as a team in promoting AICA all over social media and creating digital strategies. Can you please tell me more about what AICA Digital Strategy is doing, and also how do you see your role as the chair for this committee?
Sure. Yes. The digital strategy, it used to be called, actually, I think, the Web Committee.
Okay.
When Elisa Ruska was chair of it some years ago. And because the main project, actually, at that time, it was to rebuild the website of AICA International. That it was really kind of in need of a sort of a refresh and update. So they managed to do it. The committee at the time just pulled themselves together, and they created this kind of a pattern and content and the directory of all the national section. And it was a huge task, I remember, because I was part of the committee at the time. I just arrived when it was about to be launched somehow. And I remember that the gigantic sort of a task of creating a website that works for 60 plus national committees somehow. And that was the main actual reason to call it the Web Committee, because it was very, very big task. And then after the AICA International website was launched, somehow the focus changed, and we transitioned to a new phase. And that's why the name of the committee was changed from Web Committee to Digital Strategy Committee, because somehow we take care of all what is the digital aspect of the communication of AICA. So obviously we have the website, and with the different sort of task and responsibility that come to it in terms of update, in terms of the resources we have on the website. If you think about, for instance, creating the platform for the voting, maybe the members know, but AICA historically always had a voting system which was in person at the General Assembly or the board level. But obviously with the COVID pandemic had to change, so we implemented basically the electronic votes, and that was also a task that the digital strategy committees took upon themselves, together with the membership committee and the election and the membership committee. Another example, for instance, are all the social media channels that AICA has and manages. So we had historically, again, it was actually part and parcel of the Secretariat's office in Paris. Now we have a social media manager, which actually schedule posts and source the content from different national sections, or from the Secretariat itself, or from the proceedings, for instance, of the General Assembly, or the board member, or the Congress itself, or other events actually that are organized, like webinars and things like that. Webinars and online events are also part of the digital strategy remit, let's say. Not much in terms of the content, but in terms of guaranteeing the digital platform for that, and the visibility and the marketing, etc. And lastly, for instance, something like this, the podcast series that kind of you initiated. That's also part of the Digital Strategies Committee remit, because it's somehow is digital content recorded, produced by AICA, and distributed by AICA through different channels. So that's the reason to have a digital strategies committee, because it's something important in our age. We know very well that half of our life somehow is online, and if you ever had the misfortune, as I did actually, to be hacked in your mobile phone or on your social media, it's and you kind of lose control of it, because maybe they hack your profile and they started to act as if you were there, but you were not in control. It's actually quite a scary experience to think about it, because you realize how much of your life, in terms of contacts, in terms of information, data, even very personal, let alone the financial information, but also the conversation you have with your peers, with your friends, with your families. And it's quite interesting it's an interesting experience, although it's quite stressing, let's say, stressful, to see that part of your life slipping away from you until you regain control of it, and you say, okay, phew, I'm back as a one.
Yes, that happened to you lately in the
Not
recent
lately,
years?
but it was a few years ago that it was actually during the pandemic.
Okay.
And my Instagram account, which I run since 12 years or something like that, it has a big following, and I use it only for work, luckily, so I don't really post personal information on it. But it was actually, they managed to, although I had a two-step factor verification factor or whatever, they really managed to infiltrate and hack it. And I, luckily, and by contacting different people and counter hackers and Meta and Instagram, I got it back within 48 hours. But it was actually an interesting experience, which, it was the first for me.
Yeah, it was interesting and also stressful, as you said.
Totally.
Yes, because you have an awesome online presence. I was checking your Instagram account, your website, and congratulations on the numbers for following, for comments. How did you manage to get all this reach, all this organic reach to your community?
It's just a matter of time, I think, because it's I'm running the account, and also my website is a kind of an online live archive where I post every activities that I do, being that a text, a publication, a book, an editorial work, a curating of an exhibit, the curatorial part of an exhibition, or the concept, or podcasts like this, or talks, events. I just upload it because for me it's a helpful tool to remember what I've done, and if I have to go back to that content, for instance, to discuss or to expand it or to retrieve it for a certain reason, I know where it is and I know I can do it. Otherwise it will be dispersed among thousands of folders on your laptop that you will never find it. So it was like a necessity somehow. And in terms of the social media, it's just, I'm posting regularly about my work and my activities, and the activities the museum I direct, or the activities of the other project I do as an independent, or the writing. And it's something that it grows somehow over time. And it's interesting. It's I'm just, I'm using also those tools. For instance, when you post on Instagram, it gets reposted automatically on X or LinkedIn or whatever. which help somehow to spread the contents through different channels, but also to have different backup in case something goes wrong.
Yeah, I can understand that, because I also post regularly on Instagram and on other social media, and for me it's quite challenging because I don't find the time all the time to post news about my curatorial experience, about my CV. And as you said, yes, a website is a good place where you can put your experience, your history, because you are going to forget, because you are doing lots and lots of curatorial and publishing activities. And tell me, from your point of view, an artist should be present on social media, should have a online active presence.
Interesting question. I met a lot of artists who were opposed to it somehow. They would say, well, it's not really my word. I prefer to work on the content and my practice and then let other people do the megaphone for it, which is, I respect as a choice. I think it's interesting because it's, as an artist, you can really create a community of followers and almost a support system, where whatever you do and whatever you post, even if it is not a final work, even if it is some sort of an experiment or a halfway through or the making of a process, for instance, or a thinking process, even rather than a production process, you can create a kind of a feedback loop, which kind of reinvigorate this bond with your community, and it kind of somehow it's help you to go further and to push further. And I would say it's the same thing for critics as well as for curators. If you are able and you have you find the time, not you have the time to post regularly and create that sort of a social bond, although it's a very remote bond because it's not a material bond, it's like online, but somehow these relationships are real. To some degree, that there are scientific studies who say that actually the feedback you got from social media posts in terms of likes and comments and things like that, it releases the same amount of dopamine if you had that kind of a feedback in person, which is interesting because we never think that is the same thing, but somehow for the neurons it acts as if, so it kind of accounts towards that end. But of course, there are people who rather not to engage because they don't want to feel the pressure of it. Because let's be clear, once you started with the social media cycle, you do feel a bit of a pressure that you're, oh my God, you're not posting enough, or you missed that post, or you didn't have the time to post that new. And so it creates a bit of anxiety. Now, I think that the balance here is to just create an awareness that you can let this thing go. It's good if you post. If you don't post it and you regret it, so just let it go and just think about the next thing, because there's no point in stressing about what you haven't done it really. And another possibly advantage of working in a team or as a duo, as I work, or with a collective, is that maybe you don't have the time to post it, maybe someone else can do it, maybe your colleague can do it, and then maybe you just repost it, which is much easier. Or reshare it. It's so you create this mechanism somehow, or you found this mechanism where you can actually have the possibility to have a presence online, even if you don't invest too much of a time in it, because you realistically might not have that time somehow.
Yes, you're right. And your advices are awesome, because you are talking about what's happening to different art critics, commentators, artists all over the world, because we have this regret of not posting, but also we have the regret, oh, why did I post that? And I would like to keep the conversation in the same area, because I'm really keen about learning more about your digital strategies for online presence. And I would like to ask, how do you deal with negative feedback, with bad commentaries that are happening? Because this is it's a normal way of being an online presence or a presence in the art domain. At one point, you're going to get some bad reviews, bad feedbacks. How do you deal with it?
It's I think with the same principle that you don't have to take it personally. It's a bit hard not to take personally if it is a project of yours, if it is an exhibition of yours, or a text you wrote and you put so much time and so much energy into that, and then the review maybe or the comments is kind of a sort of a soul destroying. But at some point, I mean, you're not in control of that. So if you choose to be in the actually, it was the same when critics were only writing for magazines and printed newspaper. They might got the feedback like a month later instead of 20 minutes later, but somehow the principle was the same. And I think it comes with the territory, really. If you write as if you are an artist or if you are as a curator, you bring something out in the world that it wasn't there before. And therefore you expose yourself and you have to be ready to take the negative feedback. I try not to take it personally. I let it go. I read once a very good advice. I can't remember who was it. I think it was a theater director, and he was saying that he, as a principle, as an ethical decision, let's say, he never read any of the review of his work, of his plays, until a year after it happened. Which is, because he was putting this 12 months time in between his investment in that piece and the feedback he got it, either positive or negative. He wasn't reading anything. He was, consciously staying away. Probably was a time when social media wasn't around that much, so it was like only a kind of a printed version. Now it's much more difficult because you're kind of bombarded from different angles. But as an idea, I think is an interesting thing to put some times in between so you don't take it personally, and probably by that time you are on to something else, so you're less invested into that.
Yes, you're right. You're less invested when times it's going by from the start of the project. Can you please tell me what's your next projects or what are you working for the moment as a curator?
I both actually as a writer, as a curator, not as a curator, for my museum in the Media Majlis Museum in Doha at Northwestern University in Qatar, which is a museum of art, media, and technology. It sits at the crossroad of the three. We are preparing an exhibition on the relation between investigative journalism and AI. So it has a very heavy tech and social issues somehow element in that, and granting a text for that and kind of supervising a bit of the content and the direction of the exhibition, which is curated by Jack Thomas Taylor, who's the curator at the Media Majlis. At the same time, I'm working with Auronda Scalera, a colleague of mine with whom I form a kind of a duo on art and technology, let's say. We are preparing new Riyadh Festival. That's Auronda, there's Dr. Effat Fadag, and there is a couple of other curators actually, Daniela Rado, and Silvana Lagos, and Giovanna Goth, and other actually people involved as a curatorial advisor. That will open on the end of November, and it's a massive biennial scale sort of a media and art festival, which will present 60 major media art installation in the city in 3 different hubs of Riyadh. And before that, actually, that we are launching for the Freeze Week in October. Again, with Auronda Scalera, we are curating the anniversary exhibition of the Lumen Prize. The Lumen Prize is the biggest prize in terms of art and technology, let's say, or digital arts, divided in different categories. We are the nominators for the immersive and interactive categories, but we also curating the exhibition, which is in collaboration with Sotheby's for basically the gala benefit of the Lumen Prize for the anniversary. That's the 1, 2, 3. So we have the Lumen Prize in October, Nouriad Festival in November, and the Media Magic exhibition on AI and investigative journalism in January 2025.
You talk a little bit about AI, and I really have this question about asking you, how do you see AI interacting with the art world? Is this changing in a good way, in a bad way? What's your opinion on this question?
Yeah, we just published an interview, actually, me and Ron, on that. Funnily enough, we just published it on Instagram like a couple of days ago. We collectively, I think, it's not just my opinion, but we think that it depends really what is your practice as an artist. If your practice is something that you work on a brief, responding to a certain circumstances or directions, it might indeed jeopardize your work and career. I'm thinking about illustrators, for instance, in this case, or graphic designers. If you are an artist who are kind of a more free of these commissions, let's say, of this brief, then it might very well be a very precious tool, because you can actually input your previous work as a database. You can ask the algorithm through some prompt engineering to create a version of your work that kind of you think it should have this and this and that characteristic, of this and this and that element. Obviously, is a trade-off, to be clear, because once you put your work into the engine, let's say, being that Gemini or ChatGPT or whatever, then it will use your content also for other inquiries from other people. So obviously, it's a trade-off. But somehow, if you think about the process of iteration of a work by an artist, or even a critic, or even a writer, how many drafts do you do before publishing an article or a review or a whole book? I mean, hundreds in certain cases, and then that process can be speed up with your own content somehow. So that's, it can be used in a very effective and intelligent way, but always there will be a trade-off at some point, which is the same trade-off as we are embracing social media. Obviously, social media, we create, as I was mentioning before, the support structure, the community around us, but at the same time, we basically provide content for the corporation running those social media to use our content in different way, to target advertising for different groups. So it's really, we need to be aware about it. Technology is neither good or bad. I see it as a neutral ground. It can be used for both good or bad reasons. But the important thing is to be aware about it and to make an informed choice.
That's an awesome reply from your point, from you stating that it's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's a neutral one, and thank you very much for stating that. And I also ask you that because I think this is a hot topic. You mentioned that you also got an interview with the same question. Everybody is talking about AI, is talking about AI changing the art world, and I would like, as a final question, because time is running out, to circle back to AICA, and if you have any advice to art curators, art commentators that want to join AICA and don't have the courage to do that, they feel they lack experience in order to do that, what should they do in order to, I don't know, just have the courage to apply for AICA?
Absolutely. No, I think it's a very good question, because I remember when I applied many years ago, I was like, oh, I need to find the 2 references to endorse my work, and then who should I? In the end, it was actually quite easy, because I knew so many people who knew actually the work I was doing, remote and close to me, that it was really a no-brainer in a way. So my advice would be just embrace it. Just it's seen as one brick in your life and career architecture. So you can enjoy the Critics Association, you can enjoy the Curator Association, you can enjoy the Art Historian Association, or the Institutional Worker Association. There are different networks out there, global networks, which are really somehow helpful to shape your way of thinking and the way you know people, and to understand what's going on. And it's just a matter to take a step and say, okay, I will apply. I read the guideline, I prepare the statement, I prepare my CV. It's not very different. It's easier than a job application or an application for a right to residency, for instance. And then you go ahead. It's an online process as well. Most of the national chapter has an online submission form. So it's really kind of a not super demanding in terms of the time you have to do it, because presumably you do have some sort of biography or sort of a curriculum vitae kind of already, maybe to be updated. Presumably you do have a statement of intent. You know what you're doing. It's not the first time you apply for something. So, and even if it is the first time, I think it's a good step to take it. And the community is very vibrant. All the different international networks, they really can help you to not only connect with like-minded people, but also to have a grasp what's going on in different regions of the world, which is actually, I think, for us working in art and culture, is an essential thing, to have a different perspective on things. And that's, to be fair, is the reason why actually I moved from Europe to the Middle East, because I was really kind of felt it was the time for me to step aside and have a different perspective on what's going on around the world. And it's really rewarding. Joining this network, actually, it's a very likely experience. So I would really, really encourage, actually, especially young writers and curators to do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm always asking this question during the podcast, because I'm really keen on growing up the community, and also making the community more visible to everybody, because AICA is really changing the way we see art criticism. We are connecting with different colleagues from different countries. And in the final part of your question, you said you moved to the Middle East in order to see a different vision, to see a different way of curating, of organizing events. What's your different perspective in 3 minutes, if you can say?
Yes, I think for once, actually, the whole perspective on what matters is read through the lens of the global south, or the global majority, should we speak. So there is less preoccupation of what's going on in terms of Europe and North America, and much more what's going on, for instance, in South Asia or Latin America. That's a major kind of a first impact you have it. Nothing, the Europe and the UK or the US is not the center of the world. Suddenly, there is something else going on, and you absorb this other way of discussing topics which are not pertinent to Europe or America. And secondly, there is, I would say more philosophically, maybe, there is a certain layering of priorities in life that I found it really fascinating and intriguing. In Europe, to talk, we both come from there. There is this kind of almost the priority is the work, and you're constantly identified with your work, and then you have the family, and then you might have some wellness or spiritual or whatever sort of a dimension that you cultivate in your spare time, almost. And here is actually the other way around. Here, actually, the spiritual element is the priority, is at the top. The second layer is your personal connection, being that family or friends or close relatives or your community members. And the third one is actually the work outputs. And it's not because things doesn't happen, but that's the priority. And it's an interesting thing because it kind of slow down a bit the process, this hecticness of doing things. It might be actually contradictory because I'm doing a lot of things, but I'm doing a lot of things precisely because I don't have that rush somehow to do things, because there are a sort of environment which kind of allow me to think through it in a different way.
That's an awesome reply. That's an awesome way of ending this AICA podcast. Thank you very much, Alfredo, for all your knowledge and all your information you shared with us on this day, on this AICA podcast. I hope I'm going to see your exhibition. I'm going to read your book as soon as possible. And also, thank you very much for all the discussion. Hope we're going to meet again to have a second episode for
Definitely.
AICA Podcast.
Thank you so
Definitely.
much, Mihaela, and thank you for the AICA actually membership and the listeners to this.
Okay, thank you. And for you out there, thank you very much for listening to our podcast and also for viewing our podcast. We're going to see you soon with a new episode. Thank you. Have a lovely
Thank
day.
you. Bye-bye.